So I'm from Broadridge. Just some background before I go into this. We have a very large business where we work with our clients. We mostly work with financial services companies and help them to store huge amounts of information, often for regulatory and compliant reasons. And as we go through this, you'll see how we actually leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence to actually make this data set valuable and drive a lot of business value. So when we think about storage and archival, and let's be honest, there's nothing more exciting than storage and archival. The reasons companies typically do this is because of regulations, right? You have to store this data for 7 years. You have to store this data for 3 years. There's all different types of regulations. We all are in different industries. We're probably all in a lot of regulated industries. This is why we do this. And if you think about what we do with the content, a lot of it looks like that box in the middle, right? So we all drive around and we see the Iron Mountain truck come and pick up those boxes. You basically put stuff in it, and you never think about it again. Unfortunately, that has been basically the same paradigm that we've used for digital archival. We put the content there, and we never think about it again. And I always joke that what does archival mean? It's where content and data go to be forgotten, right? We put it there, we forget it. So when we work with our clients, I think as people think about how they actually manage their information, historically it's been these monolithic solutions, but more and more companies have a desire to actually use this information for purpose and to drive value. So we've been a partner with AWS for a while, and last January actually, I can actually tell you it was last January 24th because the 25th I had a surgery on my thumb. We all flew out to Seattle and we sat down and we said, if we think about archival and storage, what if we challenged ourselves? What if instead of just making this a regulatory compliance service, if we can actually use this information to drive business value? So that it's not just sitting there. You have to store it anywhere anyway. What if we could actually use it for a valuable purpose? And so as we looked at the solutions that are today that people use, one of the biggest things, obviously from a cloud perspective, is that today's solutions are really cost prohibitive. You have to buy a lot of hardware. You have to buy a lot of software. You tend to buy stuff up front based upon volumes that you may reach or may not reach. That's a problem. The information is captive. You basically put it there, and it's really hard to actually work with the information and to use it. And because of that, the information is typically standardized. There's some type of structure associated with the information, even if you don't want a structure. And as a result, business use is frankly minimal. There's usually information that's made available through a website. Maybe there's some reporting, but not very exciting. So when we started to think about this, we looked at 3 personas. And you'll see how this drives into kind of an AI and ML conversation in a second. The first one was around operations. Can we actually create a series of services that allows us to engage with the information? In some cases, requiring clients to move that information. In other cases, actually allowing clients to leave the information where it is. The second one was around legal and compliance. And this one has taken on particular interest recently because of 2 words. The first is GDPR, and the second one's is a bunch of words. It's the California privacy rules. Everyone's familiar with those rules? So storage and archival and the way that we manage customer information has evolved significantly, and these rules have basically exploded the way that we've done it in the past. And they require certain things to happen, right? They require a customer to be able to call up and say, forget about my information. How do you find all that information? Right? That's like an interesting use case for machine learning. The last one was, what can we do? Well, even before I get there, the other interesting one is around anomaly detection, right? So can we actually find patterns in the underlying content that we're storing that detects fraud, that detects business problems, may detect opportunities? How can we use this information to drive value? The third one, which is the one that I tend to get excited about because there's a chatbot involved, is the idea of using this information to drive customer service. So if you think about all the data that organizations store, if you think about a typical use case of someone calling up a call center, there's probably someone on the other end that's going into one of these archives to pull up information and provide an answer. Well, there's some pretty interesting things we can do with that information. We're going to walk through a use case in a second. So what we came up with was this concept of intelligent information management. And that name's not overly exciting, but it's this idea of making the data live, making it usable, making us to be able to drive value. So I'm going to walk through a demo, and I'm going to highlight that this demo is actually, this is a captive demo. We recorded this before just because, given the logistics of a room, to actually call into a call center from a room doesn't work very well. And we also recorded it for my colleague, Andrea, who's sitting right over here. So I'm not Andrea, she is, but you'll get the idea as we go through it.
Hi, Andrea. How can I help you today?
Hey, what price did I buy Amazon and what day was that?
Okay, you need to know when you purchased Amazon and at what price. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
All right. I see that you purchased Amazon on Wednesday, August 22, 2018 at $1,904.90. For your information, Amazon stock is currently trading at $1,945.27, which is up $40.93. Would you like this texted to you?
That'd be great.
Great, the text is on its way. Can I help you with anything else?
Nope, all good. So that use case, what did that use case actually do in the back end? So we actually have a repository. We work, again, with a lot of investment companies. A repository of huge amounts of information around transaction flow, around trade confirms, statements, documents, all types of information. Talking to our clients, one of the typical use cases that they get when people call the call center at somewhere between $5 and $10 a phone call is to call up and say, hey, when did I buy that stock? So in this use case, what the system is actually leveraging is leveraging that information. It's using AI. It's using natural language queries to be able to understand what the user is asking for. And it responds and looks up the information from the underlying data store to solve a business problem. The value proposition here across industries is in the hundreds of millions of dollars because you have the ability to have customer service people focus now on value-added services versus focus on answering routine queries.
Goodbye.
Thank you. So I kind of just went through that, but it interrogated the stored information. It matched the data with the current trade information. It calculated the differences, and it actually sent it as a text to the user. Very robust business problem that we're trying to solve there, and it adds a lot of value. So what did we actually do, and what did we think about when it comes to intelligent information management? Right, so the first piece is the actual secure storage of the information. And interestingly enough, Amazon announced this morning, for those of you who saw it, an addition to S3 called Object Lock, which basically brings worm compliance to S3. It was already in Glacier. And this is something we're pretty excited about because when we had to store the information for compliance purposes in Glacier, we couldn't use it in a real-time environment. Now that it's in S3, and in fact what we were doing is we were storing it in S3 and Glacier. Now that this new feature is available, we can just store the information in S3 and make it usable right there. So that's kind of component number one. The next thing is around this case around how do we actually streamline the compliance and regulatory requests, which for anyone who deals with these, it continually gets more complicated. They add new ones and they don't take away the old ones. And a great example of that is GDPR, where you have regulatory requirements to store information for 7 years, but your customer can call up and say, please delete my information and give it to me. How does that work? The last piece, or some of the other pieces, one was around identifying additional assets, right? And this is, we talked earlier about connectors, right? The idea of being able to connect to not just applications and storage mechanisms that sit within the AWS environment, but also be able to store and integrate into legacy applications so we can pull information out of there. And then the idea of actually adding value on top of that through artificial intelligence and machine learning. So if we kind of look at that, and we look at the structure of how we actually thought about doing this, very much a kind of as-a-service type model, where our approach and our model is that when we create solutions, obviously everything we create is available through many managed solutions, but we also make everything an API so that people can build on top of what it is that we're doing. But the idea of creating this abstraction layer, and within that abstraction layer are all the business value-added services that we can drive across the enterprise and potentially across multiple enterprises. So what does that look like from an AWS perspective? Right, so these are some of the ones we just talked about, but if we go into some of that of using the AI and the natural language through Poly, one of the more interesting use cases is Amazon recognition. And a lot of the information that we end up storing for our clients starts as image content. Right, sometimes that content could just be a scanned document that came in an application, for example. And one of the big problems is it's largely very difficult to get that information out. By leveraging a combination of things where we can actually apply recognition to pull the actual content out, and then using machine learning to actually create taxonomies, we can make the information usable, which drives a lot of value. I'm not wearing my reading glasses, so I'm going to have to look at it over here because I can't see what else I have on the screen. So the other applications that we're leveraging is around the use of Cognito to be able to secure the information, and because we are in a multi-tenant, multi-tiered environment where we do work with lots of different clients across our organization. But what gets interesting is on top of the AWS services, we've added this tier of what we call our Broadridge services. This is kind of our special sauce that sits on top of what AWS provides, where we can add these business value functions, insights, web analytics, natural language search, identification of risk and fraud. And what we find very interesting about this, kind of going into the continuous improvement loop that we were talking about earlier, is much like we've done for the last 10 to 15 years when it came to website design and it came to marketing, we're doing the same types of thing now with the actual use of data, where we're continually learning, and those learnings are identifying trends and analytics that we can actually use to create new products, which is pretty exciting.